Throughout modern history, the relationship between the United States and China has been shaped by rivalry, mistrust, and competition. While the two nations are deeply connected through trade and diplomacy, there are several actions taken by the United States that China considers unforgivable wrongs. These moments have left scars that continue to influence how Beijing views Washington today. In this video, we'll explore 10 of the biggest wrongdoings the U.S. has committed against China. To understand the roots of China's suspicion toward foreign powers, we must go back to the 19th century. While Britain is most often remembered for the Opium Wars, the United States also played a role in this devastating period. American traders profited from selling opium to China, contributing to widespread addiction, social collapse, and humiliation for the Chinese people. This period became known in China as the Century of Humiliation, a time when foreign powers divided the country, imposed unequal treaties, and stripped away sovereignty. Although the U.S. later portrayed itself as a defender of freedom, the Chinese have never forgotten that America also took part in this exploitation. To this day, history books in China teach the Opium Wars as the beginning of foreign oppression, with America included in that story. One of the longest-running sources of conflict between the U.S. and China is Taiwan. Ever since the Chinese Civil War ended in 1949, Washington has supported the government in Taipei, first diplomatically and later through military means. The United States has sold billions of dollars in advanced weapons to Taiwan, from fighter jets to missile systems, and it frequently sends warships through the Taiwan Strait as a show of power. From America's perspective, this is about supporting democracy and maintaining balance in Asia. But from China's perspective, it's a direct violation of sovereignty, a deliberate attempt to divide the country, and one of the most provocative acts the U.S. continues to carry out. Every arms deal and every naval passage hardens Beijing's view that America wants to keep China permanently divided. In the early 1950s, U.S. troops clashed directly with Chinese forces during the Korean War. When China entered the war to support North Korea, American forces responded with devastating firepower. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese soldiers were killed, and countless civilians near the border suffered as well. Although the war ended in an armistice, it left a deep scar on China's memory. For many Chinese families, the Korean War is remembered as the moment when their sons and fathers were lost to direct American fire. In Chinese history, it is described as a heroic defense against U.S. aggression, but also as a bitter reminder that America was willing to fight China head-on. That war still shapes military strategy in Beijing today. Decades later, during the Vietnam War, China again felt the weight of American military power. As U.S. forces bombed North Vietnam, many of those strikes crossed into Chinese territory. Villages near the border were hit, killing both Chinese civilians and soldiers. China had been supporting North Vietnam with supplies and manpower, and in turn, the U.S. treated parts of southern China as fair game. These bombings reinforced Beijing's belief that America did not respect China's borders or sovereignty. For ordinary Chinese people living near the frontier, the Vietnam War was not a distant conflict. It was an invasion that reached their own soil. This remains a less discussed but very real grievance in China's history with the United States. One of the most shocking and unforgettable events happened in 1999, during the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia. U.S. forces dropped bombs on the Chinese embassy in Belgrade, killing 3 Chinese journalists and injuring many others. Washington called it a mistake, blaming outdated maps. But in China, almost no one believed that explanation. To many, it looked like a deliberate attack meant to send a warning to Beijing. Protests erupted across China. Crowds surrounded the U.S. embassy in Beijing, chanting and throwing rocks. The images of burning anger were broadcast across Chinese television, fueling anti-American sentiment that still lingers today. For the Chinese people, the embassy bombing was not just a tragic accident. It was a violation of international law, an attack on their nation's dignity, and one of the darkest moments in modern U.S.-China relations. In 2001, tensions spiked again when a U.S. Navy surveillance plane collided with a Chinese fighter jet near Hainan Island. The Chinese pilot, Wang Wei, was killed, while the American crew made an emergency landing on Chinese soil. China detained the U.S. crew for days, demanding an apology. Washington refused to admit fault, calling it an accident. For Beijing, however, it was clear proof that America was spying right off China's coastline and putting lives at risk. The incident was front-page news for weeks, and the name Wang Wei became a symbol of sacrifice against American intrusion. It reinforced the idea that U.S. military aircraft operate recklessly in China's backyard, a practice that continues even today. Fast forward to the 21st century, and the battlefield has shifted to economics. Under President Donald Trump, the U.S. launched a trade war against China, slapping massive tariffs on Chinese goods. Billions of dollars in trade were disrupted, hurting businesses and families on both sides. But it didn't stop there. The U.S. has imposed sanctions on Chinese companies, banned technology exports, and tried to cut off China's access to advanced semiconductors. These moves are seen in Beijing as an attempt to cripple China's growth and prevent it from surpassing the U.S. economically. From Washington's perspective, it's about fairness and protecting intellectual property. From Beijing's perspective, it's a declaration of economic war, an effort to keep China from reaching its full potential. While Washington often accuses China of cyber attacks, documents leaked by Edward Snowden revealed that the U.S. itself has been running global surveillance programs like PRISM, spying on China's government and its citizens. At the same time, the U.S. has been accused of funding foreign media outlets to spread anti-China stories, painting Beijing as a global threat. Chinese officials call this information warfare, an attempt not only to undermine China's international reputation, but also to influence how the world views its rise. From hacking to headlines, Beijing sees these actions as proof that America is not only competing on the battlefield and in the marketplace, but also in the war of ideas. The South China Sea is one of the most disputed regions in the world. China claims almost the entire area, while neighboring countries and the U.S. reject those claims. America regularly sends warships and aircraft through the region under what it calls freedom of navigation operations. To Washington, it's about keeping sea lanes open. To Beijing, it's nothing less than military provocation. American destroyers sailing just miles from Chinese claimed islands. Every time a U.S. ship passes through, it risks confrontation with the Chinese Navy. This constant military pressure deepens mistrust and raises the risk of an accidental clash that could spiral out of control. Finally, the U.S. has consistently tried to limit China's role on the world stage. Washington has pressured allies not to use Chinese technology like Huawei's 5G, blocked Chinese investments in sensitive industries, and worked to exclude China from leadership positions in international organizations like the UN and the WHO. For Beijing, this is proof that the U.S. is determined to contain its rise, no matter the cost. Every time China launches an initiative like the Belt and Road, Washington counters with warnings, sanctions, or rival programs. In Beijing's view, America cannot accept a world where China plays an equal role in shaping global rules. These 10 actions, spanning war, diplomacy, technology, economics, and propaganda, are seen in China as clear evidence of America's hostility. To many Chinese people, they are not just historical events, but ongoing wrongs that continue to shape how they see the United States today.